Freddie Mercury froze on stage for 7 minutes at Wembley. 72,000 fans did something incredible. Freddie Mercury was in the middle of Bohemian Rhapsody when something happened that had never occurred in Queen's entire career. He stopped singing. Completely. For 7 full minutes, the most electrifying frontman in rock history stood frozen at center stage while 72,000 people held their breath. What happened next would become the most beautiful moment in Wembley Stadium's history. July 12, 1986. Wembley Stadium, London. 8:47 p.m. The air was electric. 72,000 voices had been screaming for 2 solid hours as Queen tore through their greatest hits. The stage lights painted everything in gold and crimson. Freddie Mercury owned that stage the way few performers ever have. He strutted. He commanded. He made 72,000 people feel like he was singing directly to each one of them. The band launched into Bohemian Rhapsody. The crowd went absolutely wild. But in the third row, section A14, something else was happening. Something that would change everything. Sarah Mitchell, 19 years old, sat clutching a photograph. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. The girl in the picture was her twin sister, Emma. They'd bought these tickets together 9 months ago. They'd saved for 6 months, working double shifts at the chip shop in Manchester. They'd planned every detail of this trip. Emma would never see this show. 3 weeks earlier, Emma had died in a car accident on the M6. Sarah had spent those weeks in a fog of grief so thick she could barely breathe. Her parents had begged her not to come tonight. "It's too soon," her mother said. "You're not ready." But Sarah came anyway. Because Emma would have wanted her to. Because this was supposed to be their night. Because she needed to feel close to her sister one more time. She'd been holding it together. Barely. The music helped. Freddie's energy helped. For 2 hours, she'd almost felt normal again. Then came Bohemian Rhapsody, the song Emma had played on repeat since they were 14. The song they'd sung together 1,000 times in their tiny shared bedroom. The song Emma had been humming the morning of the accident. The piano intro started. Freddie's voice filled the stadium. "Is this the real life? Is it just fantasy?" Sarah broke. Not quietly. Not gracefully. She stood up and screamed Emma's name. Once, twice, 3 times. A raw animal sound of pure grief that somehow cut through 72,000 voices. People around her turned. Some looked annoyed, some looked concerned. A security guard started moving toward her. But on stage, Freddie heard something. He was halfway through the second verse when he stopped singing. Just stopped. Mid-word. Brian May's guitar continued for a few bars before he noticed. Roger Taylor's drums faltered. John Deacon looked up, confused. Freddie stood completely still, one hand on the microphone stand. His eyes were scanning the crowd. The music stopped. 72,000 people fell silent. You could hear the wind moving through the stadium. You could hear Sarah Mitchell crying in row 3. Freddie shielded his eyes against the stage lights, looking out into the crowd. "Someone's hurting," he said softly into the microphone. His voice was nothing like his stage voice. It was gentle, concerned, human. The silence was absolute. "I can feel it," Freddie continued. He wasn't performing now. He was just talking. "Someone out there is carrying something very heavy tonight. Someone's heart is breaking." Sarah felt like the entire stadium was staring at her. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to run. But her legs wouldn't move. Freddie waited. The stadium waited. Then something extraordinary happened. A woman in section C, 5 rows back, stood up. She was crying too. She didn't say anything. She just stood there with tears streaming down her face. 5 seconds passed. A man in section G stood up. Then another woman in section F. Then 2 teenagers in the upper deck. Then a dozen more. Then 100. Within 2 minutes, thousands of people were standing. Not cheering, not shouting. Just standing in solidarity with whatever pain was filling that stadium. Sarah looked around in shock. All these strangers, all these people who didn't know her or Emma or what she was going through. They were standing with her. Freddie watched this happen with tears in his eyes. He nodded slowly, as if understanding something profound. Music, he said quietly into the microphone, is supposed to bring us together. Not just when we're happy, especially when we're not. He looked at his bandmates. Let's do something we've never done before. Brian raised his eyebrows. What are you thinking? Freddie smiled. Trust me. He stepped to the edge of the stage and sat down. Right there on the floor of the Wembley stage, legs dangling over the edge, he sat like he was on someone's front porch. I want to sing this song again, he said. But differently. I want to sing it for everyone who's lost someone, everyone who's hurting, everyone who came here tonight carrying something heavy. He paused. And I don't want to sing it alone. The stadium held its collective breath. I want all of you to sing with me. Not performance, not concert, just together. Like we're all in someone's living room remembering the people we love. Brian picked up his acoustic guitar. Roger grabbed a simple hand drum. John nodded. Freddie began singing. Is this the real life? But his voice was different. Stripped down, vulnerable, no theatrics, no performance. Just Freddie Mercury, sitting on a stage, singing about life and death and meaning. And 72,000 people sang with him. Not shouting, not screaming, singing. Really singing, every word, every note. Sarah Mitchell sang through her tears. She sang for Emma. She sang with Emma. For 7 minutes, that entire stadium became a cathedral of shared grief and shared love. When they reached, "Nothing really matters to me," Freddie's voice cracked. He stopped trying to hide that he was crying. The song ended. The last note hung in the air for what felt like forever. Freddie stood up slowly. He looked out at those 72,000 faces. Thank you, he said. Thank you for showing me what humanity looks like. The concert continued. Queen played for another hour. But everyone knew they'd just witnessed something that transcended performance. After the show, Freddie did something else unusual. He asked his security team to find the girl who'd been crying in row 3. It took them 40 minutes, but they found Sarah as she was leaving the stadium. They brought her backstage. Freddie was sitting on a road case, still wearing his stage clothes, makeup running down his face from sweat and tears. The backstage area was chaos, crew members rushing back and forth, equipment being packed. But in that small corner, there was stillness. When he saw Sarah, he stood up immediately. Not like a rock star greeting a fan. Like a human being greeting another human being who was hurting. "I'm Freddie," he said, as if she might not know. Sarah tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She was still clutching the photograph of Emma. Still wearing the Queen t-shirt they'd bought together. Still trying to breathe through the weight of everything. "Sarah," she finally managed. Freddie gestured to the road case. "Please, sit with me." They sat side by side. Two people who'd never met, connected by something neither of them could name. "Tell me about them," he said gently. "The person you were singing for." Sarah looked down at the photograph. Emma's face smiled back at her. 19 years old. Forever 19. "Her name was Emma," Sarah began, and her voice broke on the name. "My twin sister." Freddie didn't rush her, didn't offer empty platitudes. He just waited. So Sarah told him everything. About growing up in Manchester in a tiny flat above a laundrette. About how she and Emma had shared everything. Clothes, dreams, a bedroom so small their beds touched. About discovering Queen when they were 12. Staying up late with the volume low so they wouldn't wake their parents. Learning every lyric of every song. She told him about the chip shop where they'd worked. how they'd hidden their tips in a coffee tin under Emma's bed, how they'd counted it every week watching the number grow, how Emma had written Wembley on the tin in permanent marker. She was so excited, Sarah said, tears streaming down her face now. She made us a whole plan. What we'd wear, what train we'd take. She even picked out which hotel we'd walk past just to see it. She said it was going to be the best night of our lives. Freddie's hand found hers. He didn't say anything, just held on. The accident was 3 weeks ago. Tuesday morning, she was driving to work. A lorry jackknifed on the M6. Sarah's voice went flat, the way it does when you're recounting something so terrible your brain can't quite process it as real. They said she didn't suffer. They always say that, don't they? But I keep thinking about those last seconds. If she was scared, if she thought of me. She thought of you, Freddie said quietly. In those last moments, she thought of you. I'm certain of it. Sarah looked at him. How can you know that? Because you're twins. Because you're connected in a way most people never experience. That doesn't end. He paused. My father died when I was young. I spent years wondering if he knew how much I loved him. If I'd said it enough. If he understood. This was something Freddie rarely shared. His own grief. His own losses. Did you figure it out? Sarah asked. I did. Not because I found some answer, but because I realized that love like that doesn't need words. It doesn't need confirmation. It just is. He looked at the photograph in Sarah's hand. Emma knew, the same way you know she loved you. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. But here's what I want you to understand, Freddie continued, and his voice was fierce now. Coming here tonight? That wasn't weakness. That was the bravest thing you could have done. You honored her. You honored your plans together. You didn't let grief steal that from you. It felt like I was dying, Sarah whispered. When the song started, like I couldn't breathe. I know. Everyone out there knew. That's why they stood up. I've never felt anything like that. All those people, all those strangers. Freddie smiled. That's the thing about grief. It's the most universal human experience, and yet we all feel so alone in it. But tonight, for 7 minutes, none of you were alone. He reached up and unclasped the chain from around his neck. It was a simple silver pendant, shaped like a phoenix. Sarah had seen it glinting under the stage lights earlier. I've worn this for 6 years, he said. Through every show, every country. It reminds me that we rise from our grief. Not that we forget. Not that it stops hurting. But that we rise anyway. He placed it in Sarah's hands. Emma was here tonight. In every note, in every voice. In that moment when 72 0 strangers stood up because they recognized your pain. That's not nothing. That's everything. Sarah's fingers closed around the pendant. I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me. Just promise me something. Freddie's eyes were serious. Promise me you'll remember that you're not alone in your grief. None of us are. That's what tonight was about. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. And promise me you'll keep singing, Freddie added. For Emma. For yourself. Because that's how we keep them with us. But here's the part that nobody expected. 6 months later, Sarah received a package at her home in Manchester. Inside was a handwritten letter from Freddie and a check for 25 zlrs. The letter explained that he'd been so moved by that night at Wembley that he wanted to establish a scholarship fund in Emma Mitchell's name for young people pursuing music education. But there was more. Freddie had written 5 pages. In his distinctive handwriting, he told Sarah that he'd been thinking about that night constantly, that he'd realized something fundamental had shifted in him, that he'd spent his whole career performing for people, but that night he'd finally understood what it meant to be present with them. Your sister's life mattered, he wrote, and I want to make sure her love of music lives on, not as a tragedy, but as a gift. Every young person who receives this scholarship will know Emma's story. They'll know that she worked double shifts at a chip shop to see a concert. They'll know that she loved music the way some people love breathing, and they'll carry her forward. The Emma Mitchell Memorial Scholarship launched in March 1987. Freddie personally reviewed the first batch of applications. He insisted on reading every essay, every recommendation letter. He wanted to find kids like Emma, kids who loved music so much it hurt, kids who'd do anything for a chance. The first recipient was a 16-year-old girl from Glasgow named Rebecca Chen. She played violin. Her family had immigrated from Hong Kong with almost nothing. She'd been practicing on a borrowed instrument, taking 3 buses to her lessons, dreaming of music school but knowing it was impossible. Freddie invited both Rebecca and Sarah to the scholarship ceremony. It was small, private, held at Abbey Road Studios. When Rebecca played for them, Freddie cried. Again. "This is what Emma wanted," he told Sarah afterward. "Not monuments, not memorials. This, music continuing, dreams being possible." Sarah attended every scholarship ceremony after that, year after year. She watched dozens of young musicians receive opportunities they never thought they'd have. She heard their stories, their struggles, their impossible dreams becoming possible because her sister's name was attached to a fund that said, "Your dreams matter." In 1989, Sarah herself went back to school. She dropped out after Emma's death, unable to face anything. But Freddie kept writing to her, encouraging her, reminding her of her promise to keep singing. She enrolled in a music education program. It was terrifying. She was older than most students. She hadn't touched a piano in 3 years, but on her first day, she wore the Phoenix pendant. She's worn it every day since. Sarah became a music teacher in 1992. She started in the same Manchester neighborhood where she and Emma had grown up. She taught kids who couldn't afford private lessons, kids who shared instruments, kids who reminded her of 2 twin sisters counting tips in a coffee tin. To date, the Emma Mitchell Memorial Scholarship has helped over 400 young musicians pursue their education, but the numbers don't tell the whole story. 4 recipients have gone on to play in professional symphonies. 17 are music teachers. 8 are touring musicians. Dozens more teach private lessons, play in churches, perform at weddings, keep music alive in their communities. Freddie never spoke publicly about that night at Wembley, but Brian May later said in an interview, something changed in Freddie after that show. He'd always been compassionate, but after that night, he seemed to understand his platform differently. He knew his music could heal, not just entertain. The 7 minutes when Freddie Mercury sat on the edge of the Wembley stage and sang Bohemian Rhapsody with 72 Israelern grieving souls was never officially recorded. No video footage exists. No audio recording captures it. But everyone who was there remembers it. They tell their children about it, their grandchildren. About the night when one girl's grief became everyone's grief, and 72 Iowa strangers became a family. There's a small plaque now in Wembley Stadium installed in 2018. Section A, Row 3, Seat 14. It reads, "For Emma and Sarah Mitchell, and for everyone who has ever sung through their tears. July 12, 1986. We were all here together. Music has the power to make us dance, to make us remember, to bring us together in celebration. But sometimes, if we're very lucky, music does something more profound. It reminds us that our grief is not a burden to carry alone, that our pain is witnessed, that in our darkest moments, 72, Saroan voices can sing us toward the light. That night at Wembley wasn't about a performance. It was about humanity. About a rock star who remembered that his voice belonged to everyone who needed it. About a stadium full of strangers who understood that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stand up and say, "I see your pain, and you're not alone." Freddie Mercury gave the world countless performances. But that night, he gave us something more precious. He showed us that the spaces between the notes, the silences between the songs, the moments when we stop performing and start feeling, those are where the real magic lives. If this incredible story of compassion and shared humanity moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about the healing power of music and community. Have you ever witnessed a moment when strangers came together to support someone in pain? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more amazing true stories about the heart behind music's greatest legends.